Hey everybody, it's your favorite dork, Adorkable Blonde here. When I picked this radio station, it said it was EDM, which I thought meant electronic dance music. But apparently I was wrong. It's pretty mellow if you ask me. But oh well, it's kind of nice. It's a rainy evening here where I am. Lots and lots of rain. The ducks love it. The rest of the birds not so much, but that's okay. Rain is good, and hopefully it'll make for a really pretty green spring. We can only hope. So, we are on chapter... What chapter are we on? We're on chapter 9. Thank you so much for joining me this evening. I'm glad you took some time out of your day or morning or night or whatever time of the day it is. I sure do appreciate it. Whoops. I'm trying to make me a decent size here. Look a little bit miniature there. How's that? Oh boy, I'm in your face there now, aren't I? Let's back it up. Back it up. I'm doing a little dance in here. Sorry about that. Not to the music though. The music is pretty chill. It's gonna put me to sleep. But we'll let it play in the background here till I get started reading. So, if this is your first time here, welcome. I'm so excited to have you. What I decided to do for my streams is I do some reading. Because I like to read. I mean, I like to game too, and so I do a little gaming stream on a different platform, but really I just decided, you know what, if I'm going to show up every day to game, I need to show up every day and do something that's a little bit better for me, for my personal development, you know? So I like to read, and so I decided to read. And that way I'll show up here for you guys just to get stuff done and get some reading in. And when I start to read, I do have it pulled up on the screen here so you can follow along with me. I am in the United States and there are copyright laws here that I have to obey. So I make sure I only read things that are in the public domain. So this book that we're reading now, we are reading Sun Tzu's The Art of War, which is pretty cool. I've seen a lot about the book, heard a lot about the book. It's supposed to be great for applying to, of course, war, but also for like just life in general. And I always thought it'd be interesting to read. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to read that book. So the problem came though when I had to find a version that was in the public domain, because even though, you know, Sun Tzu wrote it like 2,500 years ago, totally in the public domain, but each time it gets translated, that translation is under copyright. So I had to go back and find an old version. I found a 1910 version. And boy, is that some tough reading. But we've been struggling through. We're on chapter 9 tonight. Woohoo! So it's good though. It's really good. This one version that I'm reading, the guy is kind of snarky. There's another translator that he really does not like. And it's funny because I cannot remember the name of the translator we use, but the name of the translator that he hates is Captain Calthrop. So we'll see lots of snarky comments, I'm sure, about Captain Calthrop because he just cannot resist throwing those in. Again, not again, but if you want to chat, go ahead and feel free. I've got our chat box up here. You won't be interrupting me at all. I love visiting with people and chatting with people. If you have questions or comments or want me to repeat something, or if I read too fast, because I do kind of read too fast, I really have to watch myself. But Yeah, I read fast. I talk fast too. Um, if you need me to slow down, just let me know and I will try to slow down so that we can go ahead and, you know, so that I don't lose you because I want it to be just as interesting and fun for you as it is for me. Um, if you don't want to follow along with the words, you can just listen to me. There's no pictures in this, so you don't have to worry about that. If you're interested in some ancient Chinese characters, there are some in here, and there's a lot of discussion about what they mean because some of them are no longer used. It's kind of cool. Um, let's see what else. Oh yeah, you can find me on YouTube. If you miss any ones or want to catch up with the whole shebang, you can find me at YouTube at the Adorkable Blonde. The Adorkable Blonde. Just add the word "the" at the beginning and an "e" at the end. So it's TheAdorkableBlonde at the Adorkable Blonde. That's where you find me on YouTube. I post these videos up there. I've got them on a playlist, so you can kind of go just straight to these videos if you want to. Another thought popped. Oh yeah, that's the thought that popped in my head. So when I read, like I said, it's kind of exhausting. There's a lot of commentary, lots of commentary, all written just in the middle of sentences and at the beginnings and at the ends, and it's just kind of a mess. But I go through the first time and I read everything, and I throw in my comments that I have on it too. But then once we finish going through the chapter all the hard way, then I go ahead and I will go back and I will read just the parts that Sun Tzu said. My kid already took off, or else I'd have him bring me my copy. I have a copy of a book that's a little later edition. Sometimes I like to compare them and see what it says, but my kids keep walking off with it, so I don't have it here. And he took off already, so I can't ask him to bring it in here. But we'll hopefully, if it gets too much and I really feel like I need to get a little bit more modern translation, we can go grab that one. So, I guess without further ado, we will see if I've got everything set up here and we will get started. Let's see. Boink. Yay! Oops, whoops. What'd I do there? Why is this showing? I do not want that to show. There it is. Ta-da! Sorry about that. Okay, so that's better there. Okay. Everything else looks good. All right, so let's get started. This is Sun Tzu's The Art of War. Chapter 9. The Army on the March. Oh, also, I don't know if you guys can see my cursor because when I see it, I can't see my screen that you see, but I do try and kind of follow along with my cursor so you can see what words I'm on. I tried to make my cursor bigger, but it doesn't really work. Not on my Adobe seems to ignore my laptop settings and just goes and does what it wants. So Chapter 9, The Army on the March. The contents of this interesting chapter are better indicated in Section 1 than by this heading. 1. Sun Tzu said, "We come now to the question of encamping the army and observing signs of the enemy." The discussion of this, as Chang Yu points out, extends from here down to this other section. Looks like sections 1 through 17. And this discussion from that point down to this section, which looks like it's sections 18 through 39. The rest of the chapter consists of a few desultory remarks, chiefly on the subject of discipline. Pass quickly over mountains. For this use of this symbol, see sections 3, see also all this other stuff. And keep in the neighborhood of valleys. 2mu says that this symbol here equals this other symbol. The idea is not to linger among barren uplands, but to keep close to supplies of water and grass. Captain Calthrop translates camp in valleys, heedless of the very next sentence. See, look at that. We are just few lines in and he's already trashing Captain Calthrop. Wuzu Chapter 3, Abide not in natural ovens, i.e. the openings of large valleys. Chang Yu tells the following antidote. Wu Tu Chiang was a robber captain in the time of the latter Han, and Ma Yuan was sent to exterminate his gang. Chiang having found a refuge in the hills, Ma Yuan made no attempt to force a battle, but seized all the favorable positions commanding supplies of water and forage. Chiang was soon in such a desperate plight for want of provisions that he was forced to make a total surrender. He did not know the advantage of keeping in the neighborhood of valleys. My computer's a little laggy. Hopefully. Oops, yep, look at that. Oh, I forgot to stop my music. Let's do that. So it looks like y'all are missing about half of my stuff. I thought it was being a little laggy. I don't know what to do about that. What can I close down to make it better? Hang on, I know you guys are missing a lot here. In case you can't. What? Okay, let's see. Still says I'm dropping frames. I don't have anything going. What, and I just updated my OBS. No, why is it giving me grief today? Let me see if I can switch. Okay. Let's see what that did. Hello, hello. Did that work? I don't know. It's acting like it didn't. Hello. Ah. Okay, so I don't know if you guys can still see me. Well, let's see. Okay, it says that worked. The dropped frames are down to 0, which makes me happy. It did disconnect for just a minute, but it seems to be okay. Well, I guess we're dropped frames at about 3%, but I can live with 3%. So, okay. Oops, now it's going up. Now what's the problem? You know, like I said, it's super rainy here. I wonder if that's causing the issues. I hope it's not too terribly laggy for y'all. I feel bad if it is. I don't know whether I should go back and reread the... I guess I'll go... Well, we'll catch up with it because we've only gone one page. I'll just reread it. That'll just make it easier. So, the army on the march. The contents of this chapter are better indicated in section 1 than by this heading. 1. Sun Tzu said, "We come now to the question of encamping the army and observing signs of the enemy." I'll skip this discussion. Pass quickly over mountains and keep in the neighborhood of valleys. Tu Mu says that this symbol here equals this symbol. The idea is not to linger among barren uplands, but to keep close to supplies of water and grass. Captain Calthrop translates, "Camp in valleys," heedless of the very next sentence. Abide not in natural ovens, i.e., the openings of large valleys. Chang Yu tells the following anecdote. Wu Tu Chiang was a robber captain in the time of the latter Han, and Ma Yuan was sent to exterminate his gang. Chiang, having found a refuge in the hills, Ma Yuan made no attempt to force a battle, but seized all the favorable positions commanding supplies of water and forage. Chiang was soon in such a desperate plight for want of provisions that he was forced to make a total surrender. He did not know the advantage of keeping in the neighborhood of valleys. 2. Camp in high places. Not on high hills, but on knolls or hillocks elevated above the surrounding country, facing the sun. Tu Mu takes this to mean facing south, and Qian Hao facing east. Do not climb heights in order to fight. This symbol is here simply equivalent to this symbol. The Tiang Tian and Yulan read this other symbol. So much for mountain warfare. After this symbol, the Tung Tian and Yulan insert this other symbol. I'm going to check my frame rates. We are doing so much better now. That is interesting. So what I did is when we got our internet, he set us up on 2 bands, a 5G band and a regular band, a lower band. And I was on 5G, and 5G was like killing us. But now that I'm on the regular one, we're doing okay. Maybe my kids are hogging the 5G. Who knows? Okay, we're so much better now. I am so sorry about all the lagginess. Thank you for sticking with me this long. I think we took care of the problem now. Awesome. Yay. Okay, back to reading. After crossing a river, you should get far away from it, in order to tempt the enemy to cross after you, according to Cao Kung, and also, says Chang Yu, in order not to be impeded in your evolutions. The Tung Tian reads these symbols if the enemy crosses a river, etc. But in view of the next sentence, this is almost certainly an interpolation. 4. When an invading force crosses a river on its onward march, do not advance to meet it in midstream. It will be best to let half the army get across and then deliver your attack. The Tung Tian and Yulan read, this symbol for this symbol without change of meaning. Wu Tzu plagiarizes this passage twice over. Li Chuan alludes to the great victory won by Han Xin over Lung Chu at the Wei River. Turning to the Qian Han Shu, chapter 34, following 6th verso, we find the battle described as follows. The two armies were drawn up on opposite sides of the river. In the night, Han Xin ordered his men to take some 10,000 sacks filled with sand and construct a dam a little higher up. Then, leading half his army across, he attacked Lung Chu, but after a time, pretending to have failed in his attempt, he hastily withdrew to the other bank. Lung Chu was much elated by this unlooked-for success and exclaiming, "I felt sure that Han Xin was really a coward." Ha, I can see where this is going. He pursued him and began crossing the river in his turn. Han Xin now sent a party to cut open the sandbags, thus releasing a great volume of water, which swept down and prevented the greater portion of Lung Chu's army from getting across. He then turned upon the force which had been cut off and annihilated it, Lung Chu himself being amongst the slain. The rest of the army, on the further bank, also scattered and fled in all directions. That's pretty clever. 5. If you are anxious to fight, you should not go to meet the invader near a river which he has to cross. For fear of preventing his crossing, Captain Calthrop makes the injunction ridiculous by omitting these other symbols. Moor your craft higher up than the enemy and facing the sun. The repetition of these words in connection with water is very awkward. Chang Yu has the note, said either of troops marshaled on the river bank or of boats anchored in the stream itself. In either case, it is essential to be higher than the enemy and facing the sun. The other commentators are not at all explicit. One is much tempted to reject their explanation altogether and understand it simply as seeking safety. It is true that this involves taking this symbol in an unusual, though not, I think, an impossible sense. Of course, the earlier passage would then have to be translated in like manner. Do not move upstream to meet the enemy. Tu Mu says, as water flows downwards, we must not pitch our camp on the lower reaches of a river, for fear the enemy should open the sluices and sweep us away in a flood. This is implied above in these words. Chuko Wu Hao has remarked that in river warfare we must not advance against the stream, which is as much as to say that our fleet must not be anchored below that of the enemy, for then they would be able to take advantage of the current and make short work of us. There is also the danger noted by other commentators that the enemy may throw poison on the water to be carried down to us. Captain Calthrop's first version was, do not cross rivers in the face of the stream, a sapient piece of advice which made one curious to know what the correct way of crossing rivers might be. He has now improved this into, do not fight when the enemy is between the army and the source of the river. So much for river warfare. In crossing salt marshes, your sole concern should be to get over them quickly without any delay. Because of the lack of fresh water, the poor quality of the herbage, and last but not least, because they are low, flat, and exposed to attack. 8. If forced to fight in a salt marsh, you should have water and grass near you and get your back to a clump of trees. Li Chuan remarks that the ground is less likely to be treacherous where there are trees, while Tu Yu says that they will serve to protect the rear. Captain Calthrop, with a perfect genius for going wrong. I love that. With a perfect genius for going wrong, says, in the neighborhood of a marsh. For the Tung Tien and Yu Lan wrongly read this symbol, and the latter also has this instead of this. So much for operations in salt marshes. In dry, level country, take up an easily accessible position. This is doubtless the force of this symbol, its opposite being this other symbol. Thus, Tu Mu explains it as ground that is smooth and firm, and therefore adapted for cavalry. Chang Yu as level ground, free from depressions and hollows. He adds later on that although Sun Tzu is discussing flat country, there will nevertheless be slight elevations and hillocks, with rising ground to your right and on your rear. The Yu Lan again reads this symbol for this symbol. Tu Mu quotes Te Kung as saying, an army should have a stream or a marsh on its left and a hill or a tumulus on its right, so that the danger may be in front and safety lie behind. Wang Sai thinks that this symbol contradicts the saying in section 2 and therefore suspects a mistake in the text. So much for campaigning in flat country. 10. These are the 4 useful branches of military knowledge. Those, namely, concerned with 1. Mountains, 2. Rivers, 3. Marshes, and 4. Plains. Compare Napoleon's military maxims, number 1, which enabled the Yellow Emperor to vanquish 4 several sovereigns. Mei Yao Qian asks, with some plausibility, whether this symbol is not a mistake for armies, as nothing is known of Huang Tai having conquered 4 other emperors. The Shi Qi speaks only of his victories over Yen Ti and Qi Yu. In the whatever this book is, it is mentioned that he fought 70 battles and pacified the empire. Cao Kung's explanation is that the Yellow Emperor was the first to institute the feudal system of vassal princes, each of whom, to the number of 4, originally bore the title of emperor. Oops, hold on just a moment. Okay, sorry about that. Kid just got home from the grocery store. He bought stuff for dinner tomorrow. Yay! So anyway, where was I? Okay. The Yellow Emperor was the first to institute the feudal system of vassal princes, each of whom, to the number of 4, originally bore the title of emperor. Li Chuan tells us that the art of war originated under Huang Ti, who received it from his minister Feng Hao. 11. All armies prefer high ground to low. High ground, says Mei Yao Qian, is not only more agreeable and sublaborious, but more convenient from a military point of view. Low ground is not only damp and unhealthy, but also disadvantageous for fighting. The original text of the 2 Shu have this symbol instead of this symbol. And sunny places to dark. I'm like kind of making up how to pronounce some of these words that I don't know. Of course, I know most of the English words, but this is like from 1910, and there's a lot of words we don't use anymore, so some of those I'm clobbering. But I know I'm really struggling with the pronunciation of a lot of the Chinese words, Chinese names, There's some Japanese names when he's talking about some of the commentaries. I know I'm mispronouncing those, but I'm doing my best. If you know how to pronounce them, please message me. We can get on Discord and a voice chat, and you can tell me how to pronounce them properly, because I really don't mean to make mispronouncing them. But I'm doing the best that I can. There's also a lot of French in here. I'm a little better with my French, but I'm still blubbing on some of the French. But anyway, so yes, please, please, please let me know if you know how to pronounce something that I'm totally not pronouncing properly, and so I can try and say it better. Because I mean, unless you just like listening to me mispronounce it and like laughing at me, and that's fine too, because I don't mind. But if you know how to say it, that would be awesome if you let me know. So, okay, back to Sun Tzu. If you are careful of your men, Cao Kung says, make for fresh water and pasture where you can turn out your animals to graze. And the other commentators follow him, apparently taking this symbol as this symbol, where this means a cattle keeper. But here, this symbol surely has reference to the health of the troops. It is the title of Chuang Tzu's third chapter, where it denotes moral rather than physical well-being. And camp on hard ground. This must mean dry and solid as opposed to damp, marshy ground. This is to be found as a rule in high places, so the commentators explain this as practically equivalent to this symbol. The army will be free from disease of every kind. Chang Yu says the dryness of the climate will prevent the outbreak of illness, and this will spell victory. 13. When you come to a hill or a bank, occupy the sunny side with the slope on your right rear. Thus you will at once act for the benefit of your soldiers and utilize the natural advantages of the ground. 14. When, in consequence of heavy rains up country, a river which you wish to ford is swollen and flecked with foam, you must wait until it subsides. 15. Country in which there are precipitous cliffs with torrents running between, deep natural hollows, explained as places enclosed on every side by steep banks with pools of water at the bottom, confined places, natural pens or prisons, explained as places surrounded by precipices on three sides, easy to get into but hard to get out of, tangled thickets, explained as places covered with such dense undergrowth that spears cannot be used, quagmires, explained as low-lying places so heavy with mud as to be impassable for chariots and horsemen, and crevices is explained by Mei Yao Qian as a narrow, difficult way between beetling cliffs. But Cao Kung says this, which seems to denote something on a much smaller scale. To Mu's note is ground covered with trees and rocks and intersected by numerous ravines and pitfalls. This is very vague, but Chia Lin explains it clearly enough as a defile or narrow pass. And Chang Yu takes much the same view. On the whole, the weight of the commentators certainly inclines to the rendering defile. But the ordinary meaning of a crack or a fissure, and the fact that these symbols above must be something in the nature of a defile, make me think that Sun Tzu is here speaking of crevices. The Tung Tien and Yu Lan read this symbol for this symbol with the same meaning. The latter also has these symbols after these symbols a palpable gloss. Should be left with all possible speed and not approached. 16. While we keep away from such places, we should get the enemy to approach them. While we face them, we should let the enemy have them on his rear. 17. If the neighborhood of your camp, the original text has this symbol, but this symbol has generally been generally adopted as yielding much better sense. There should be any hilly country. According to Cheng Yu, ponds surrounded by aquatic grass, hollow basins filled with reeds. The original text omits these symbols so that this and this symbol join to make a pair ponds and basins. This is plausible enough at first sight, but there are several objections to the reading. 1. This symbol is unlikely to have gotten into the text as a gloss on this symbol. 2. It is easy to suppose, on the other hand, that this symbol and afterwards this other symbol, to restore the balance of the sentence, were omitted by a copyist who jumped to the conclusion that this symbol and this symbol must go together. 3. The sense, when one comes to consider it, actually requires this symbol, for it is absurd to talk of pools and ponds as in themselves suitable places for an ambush. 4. Li Qing, in his Art of War, has these words. This is evidently a reminiscence of Sun Tzu, so there can be little doubt that this symbol stood in the text at this early date. It may be added that the Tung Tien and Yulan both have this symbol, and the latter also reads this symbol for that one, or woods with thick undergrowth. See, the way they throw in the commentary in the middle of the sentences makes it difficult for me, but that's why I go back through and read it the second time with just Sun Tzu's words, because it eliminates a lot of that craziness. At least it does to me. I lost my place. I'll start here. They must be carefully routed out and searched, for these are places where men in ambush or insidious spies are likely to be lurking. The original text omits this symbol, which has been restored from the Tang Tien and Yulan. The Tu Shu omits this symbol as well, making this substantive. On Cheng Yu has the note, we must also be on our guard against traitors who may lie in close covert, secretly spying out our weaknesses and overhearing our instructions. Fu and Qian are to be taken separately. When the enemy is close at hand and remains quiet, he is relying on the natural strength of his position. We still do. Sorry, I keep checking for my drop rates. I'm nervous about that because I feel bad. You guys were having to deal with all the laggy stuff. Here begins Sun Tzu's remarks on reading of signs, much of which is so good that it could almost be included in a modern manual like General Baden-Powell's Aids to Scouting. 19. When he keeps aloof and tries to provoke a battle, he is anxious for the other side to advance. Probably because we are in a strong position from which he wishes to dislodge us. If he came close up to us, says Tu Mu, and tried to force a battle, he would seem to despise us, and there would be less probability of our responding to the challenge. 20. If his place of encampment is easy of access, he is tendering a bait. This symbol is here the opposite of this other symbol in section 18. The reading of the Tung Tien and Yulan is pretty obviously corrupt. The original text, which transposes these symbols, may very possibly be right. Tu Mu tells us that there is yet another reading, this way. 21. Movement amongst the trees of a forest shows that the enemy is advancing. Cao Kung explains this as felling trees to clear a passage. And Cheng Yu says, every army sends out scouts to climb high places and observe the enemy. If a scout sees that the trees of a forest are moving and shaking, he may know that they are being cut down to clear a passage for the enemy's march. The appearance of a number of screens in the midst of thick grass means the enemy wants to make us suspicious. Whenever the meaning of a passage happens to be somewhat elusive, Captain Calthrop seems to consider himself justified in giving free rein to the imagination. Thus, though his text is here identical with ours, he renders the above broken branches and trodden grass, as of the passing of a large host, must be regarded with suspicion. Tu Yu's explanation borrowed from Sao Kung is as follows. The presence of a number of screens or sheds in the midst of thick vegetation is a sure sign that the enemy has fled and, fearing pursuit, has constructed these hiding places in order to make us suspect an ambush. It appears that these screens were hastily knotted together out of any long grass which the retreating enemy happened to come across. 22. The rising of birds in their flight is the sign of an ambuscade. Chang Yu's explanation is doubtless right. When birds that are flying along in a straight line suddenly shoot upwards, it means that soldiers are in ambush at the spot beneath. Startled beasts indicate that a sudden attack is coming. An example of Fao in the meaning of ambuscade may be found in the Sao Chuan 9th year. In the present passage, however, it is to be distinguished from this other symbol just above in that it implies onward motion on the part of the attacking force. Thus, Li Chuan defines it as this, and Tu Mu as these characters. When there is dust rising in a high column, it is a sign of chariots advancing. When the dust is low, but spread over a wide area, it betokens the approach of infantry. High and sharp, or rising to a peak, is of course somewhat exaggerated as applied to dust. The commentators explain the phenomenon by saying that horses and chariots, being heavier than men, raise more dust, and also follow one another in the same wheel track, whereas foot soldiers would be marching in ranks many abreast. According to Chang Yu, every army on the march must have scouts, some way in advance, who on sighting the dust raised by the enemy will gallop back and report it to the commander-in-chief. General Baden-Powell, as you move along, say, in a hostile country, your eyes should be looking afar for the enemy or any signs of him. Figures, dust rising, birds getting up, glitter of arms, etc. When it branches out in different directions, it shows that parties have been sent to collect firewood. There is some doubt about this reading. The Tung Tien and Yulan have, and Lu Chuan, they all have different interpretations. 24. Nope, we're still here. A few clouds of dust moving to and fro signify that the army is encamping. Chang Yu says, in apportioning the defenses for a cantonment, light horse will be sent out to survey the position and ascertain the weak and strong points all along its circumference, hence the small quantity of dust in its motion. 24. Humble words and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. As though they stood in great fear of us, says Tu Mu, their object is to make us contemptuous and careless, after which they will attack us. Chang Yu alludes to the story of Tian Tan of the Qi state, who in 279 BC was hard-pressed in his defense of Qimo against the Yan forces led by Qi Chaya. In chapter 82 of the Shi Qi we read, Tian Tan openly said, "My only fear is that the Yan army may cut off the noses of their Qi prisoners and place them up in the front rank to fight against us. That would be the undoing of our city." The other side, being informed of the speech, at once acted on the suggestion. But those within the city were enraged at seeing their fellow countrymen thus mutilated, and, fearing only lest they should fall into the enemy's hands, were nerved to defend themselves more obstinately than ever. Once again, Tien Tan sent back converted spies who reported these words to the enemy. "What I dread most is that the men of Yen may dig up the ancestral tombs outside the town, and by inflicting this indignity on our forefathers, cause us to become faint-hearted." Forthwith the besiegers dug up all the graves and burned the corpses lying in them, and the inhabitants of Chi Mo, witnessing the outrage from the city walls, wept passionately and were all too impatient to go out and fight, their fury being increased tenfold. Tien Tan knew then that his soldiers were ready for any enterprise, but instead of a sword, he himself took a mattock in his hands and ordered others to be distributed amongst his best warriors, while the ranks were filled up with their wives and concubines. He then served out all the remaining rations and bade his men eat their fill. The regular soldiers were told to keep out of sight, and the walls were manned with the old and weaker men and with women. This done, envoys were dispatched to the enemy's camp to arrange the terms of surrender, whereupon the Yan army began shouting for joy. Tien Tan also collected 20,000 ounces of silver from the people and got the wealthy citizens of Chimo to send it to the Yan general with the prayer that, when their town capitulated, he would not allow their homes to be plundered or their women to be maltreated. Chi Chie, in high good humor, granted their prayer, but his army now became increasingly slack and careless. Meanwhile, Tien Tan got together 1,000 oxen, decked them with pieces of red silk, painted their bodies dragon-like with colored stripes, and fastened sharp blades on their horns and well-greased rushes on their tails. When night came on, he lighted the ends of the rushes and drove the oxen through a number of holes which he had pierced in the walls, backing them up with a force of 5,000 picked warriors. The animals, maddened with pain, dashed furiously into the enemy's camp, where they caused the utmost confusion and dismay, for their tails acted as torches, showing up the hideous pattern on their bodies, and the weapons on their horns killed or wounded any with whom they came into contact. In the meantime, the band of 5,000 had crept up with gags in their mouths, and now threw themselves on the enemy. At the same moment, a frightful din arose in the city itself, all those that remained behind making as much noise as possible by banging drums and hammering on bronze vessels until heaven and earth were convulsed by the uproar. Terror-stricken, the Yan army fled in disorder, hotly pursued by the men of Qi, who succeeded in slaying their general Chi Chia. The result of the battle was the ultimate recovery of some 70 cities which had belonged to the Qi state. Violent language and driving forward as if to the attack are signs that he will retreat. I follow the original text here, as adopted by Tu Shu. The standard text reads this, on the strength of Cao Kung's commentary, which shows that his text included this word here. Strong as this ground is, I do not think it can counterbalance the obvious superiority of the other reading in point of sense. This symbol not only provides no antithesis to this other symbol, but makes the whole passage absurd, for if the language of the enemy is calculated to deceive, it cannot be known as deceitful at the time, and can therefore afford no sign. Moreover, the extra word in this, an awkward location by the way, spoils the parallelism with these other symbols. When the light chariots come out first and take up a position on the wings, it is a sign that the enemy is forming for battle. 26. Peace proposals unaccompanied by a sworn covenant indicate a plot. Tu Yu defines in Louis Chan as a treaty confirmed by oaths and hostages. Wang Sai and Chang Yu, on the other hand, simply say, without reason, on a frivolous pretext, as though the symbol bore the rather unusual sense of important. Captain Calthrop has without consultation, which is too loose. When there is much running about, every man hastening to his proper place under his own regimental banner, and the soldiers fall into rank, it means the critical moment has come. When some are seen advancing and some retreating, it is a lure. Captain Calthrop is hardly right in translating an advance followed by sudden retirement. It is rather a case of feigned confusion. 29. When the soldiers stand leaning on their spears, they are faint from want of food. This symbol is here probably not, whoops. Y'all, my phone fell down, so you're probably just staring at my face like my lips are not moving, but my words are coming out of my mouth. Let's see, yep, my lips are moving now. Okay, why is my head cut off? I think I'll change that. You've only been staring at me without the top of my head for like the whole chapter. Is that better? Yeah, that looks much better. I move around a lot. Okay, where were we? 30. If those who are sent to draw water begin by drinking themselves, the army is suffering from thirst. As Tu Mu remarks, one may know the condition of a whole army from the behavior of a single man. That may mean either that they drink before drawing water for the army or before they return to camp. Chang Yu takes the latter view. And then he doesn't like what everybody else says, but they're not saying it in a language I can read. 31. If the enemy sees an advantage to be gained, not necessarily booty, as Captain Calthrop translates it, and makes no effort to secure it, the soldiers are exhausted. 32. If birds gather on any spot, it is unoccupied. A useful fact to bear in mind when, for instance, as Chan Hao says, the enemy has secretly abandoned his camp. Clamor by night betokens nervousness. Owing to false alarms, or as Tu Mu explains it, fear makes men restless, so they fall to shouting at night in order to keep up their courage. If there is a disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the banners and flags are shifted about, sedition is afoot. If the officers are angry, it means that the men are weary. And therefore, as Captain Calthrop says, slow to obey. Tu Yu understands the sentence differently. If all the officers of an army are angry with their general, it means that they are broken with fatigue, owing to the exertions which he has demanded from them. When an army feeds its horses with grain and kills its cattle for food, this is expanded, which in the sense I have given above. In the ordinary course of things, the men would be fed on grain, and the horses chiefly on grass. And when men do not hang their cooking pots over the campfire, showing they will not return to their tents, you may know that they are determined to fight to the death. I may quote here the illustrative passage from chapter 71, given in an abbreviated form by the rebel Wang Cao of Ling was besieging the town of Chensang, and Hang Fu Sung, who was in supreme command, and Tung Chao were sent out against him. The latter pressed for hasty measures, but Sung turned a deaf ear to his counsel. At last the rebels were utterly worn out and began to throw down the weapons of their own accord. Sung was now for advancing to the attack, but Cho said, It is a principle of war not to pursue desperate men and not to press a retreating host. Sung answered, that does not apply here. What I am about to attack is a jaded army, not retreating host. With disciplined troops I am falling on a disorganized multitude, not a band of desperate men. Thereupon he advanced to the attack, unsupported by his colleague, and routed the enemy. Something being slain. The inferior reading, they just really didn't do a very good job copying this page. The first clause strikes me as rather shallow for Sun Tzu, and it is hard to make anything of this in the second without something. Captain Calthrop, nothing daunted, set down in his first edition when they cast away their cooking pots. He now has when the cooking pots are hung upon the wall. The sight of men whispering together. This is well explained by Tu Mu as speaking with bated breath, in small knots. The Shou Wen rather strangely defines this by this other word, but this says it's to join or contract, which is undoubtedly its primary meaning. Chang Yu is right, then, in explaining it is here by the word, this word. The other commentators are very much at sea. Or speaking in subdued tones, points to disaffection among the rank and file. Oh my gosh, you guys, my legs are killing me and I don't know why. I have to stand up here for a minute. Ugh. I don't know why my legs all of a sudden started hurting so bad and I just couldn't keep sitting down. I can't quite get settled. Let me see if I can put my legs out here. Okay. In the original text, which seems to be followed by several commentators, the whole passage stands thus, whatever this is. Here it would be the general who is talking to his men, not the men amongst themselves. This symbol, which is the chief stumbling block in the way of this reading, Tu Shu gives a very plausible emendation of this other symbol, but this is unnecessary if we keep to the standard text. Two frequent rewards signify that the enemy is at the end of his resources. Because when an army is hard-pressed, as Tu Mu says, there is always a fear of mutiny, and lavish rewards are given to keep men in good temper. Too many punishments betray a condition of dire distress, because in such case discipline becomes relaxed and unwanted severity is necessary to keep the men to their duty. 37. To begin by bluster, but afterwards to take fright at the enemy's numbers, shows a supreme lack of intelligence. I follow the interpretation of Cao Kung, also adopted by Li Chuan, Tu Mu, and Chang Yu. Another possible meaning set forth by Tu Yu, Xie Lin, Mei Yaoqian, and Wang Sai is the general who is first tyrannical towards his men, and then in terror lest they should mutiny, etc. This would connect the sentence with what went before about rewards and punishments. The Tung Tian and Yu Lin read affection instead of this other word. 38. When envoys are sent with compliments in their mouths, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. Tu Mu says, if the enemy open friendly relations by sending hostages, it is a sign that they are anxious for an armistice, either because their strength is exhausted or for some other reason. But it hardly needs a Sun Tzu to draw such an obvious inference, and although Tu Mu is supported by Mei Yaoqian and Chang Yu, I cannot think that hostages are indicated by this word. Okay, this is a long chapter. If the enemy's troops march up angrily and remain facing ours for a long time without either joining battle or taking themselves off again. The situation is one that demands great vigilance and circumspection. Captain Calthrop falls into a trap which often lurks in this word. He translates, when both sides, eager for a fight, face each other for a considerable time, neither advancing nor retiring, etc. Had he reflected a little, he would have seen that this is meaningless and as addressed to a commander who has control over the movements of his own troops. This, then, does not mean that the two armies go meet each other, but simply that the other side comes up to us. Likewise with this symbol. If this were not perfectly clear of itself, Mei Yao Jian's paraphrase would make it so. As Cao Keng points out, a maneuver of this sort may only be a ruse to gain time for an unexpected flank attack or the laying of an ambush. 40. If our troops are no more in number than the enemy, that is amply sufficient. Wang Sai's paraphrase, partly borrowed from Cao Keng, is this. Another reading adopted by Chia Lin is this, which Captain Calthrop renders much too loosely. Numbers are no certain mark of strength. It only means that no direct attack can be made. Literally, no martial advance. That is to say, Chang tactics and frontal attacks must be eschewed, and stratagem resorted to instead. What we can do is simply to concentrate all our available strength, keep a close watch on the enemy, and obtain reinforcements. This is an obscure sentence, and none of the commentators succeed in squeezing very good sense out of it. The difficulty lies chiefly in these words, which have been taken in every possible way. I follow Li Chuan, who appears to offer the simplest explanation. Only the side that gets more men will win. Cao Keng's note, concise as usual to the verge of incomprehensibility, is this. Fortunately, we have Chang Yu to expound its meaning to us in the language which is lucidity itself. When the numbers are even and no favorable opening presents itself, although we may not be strong enough to deliver a sustained attack, we can find additional recruits amongst our soldiers and camp followers, and then, concentrating our forces and keeping a close watch on the enemy, contrive to snatch the victory. But we must avoid borrowing foreign soldiers to help us. He then quotes from Wei Lao Su, Chapter 3, the nominal strength of mercenary troops may be 100,000, but the real value will be not more than half that figure. According to this interpretation, this means to get recruits, not from outside, but from the tag, rag, and bobtail which follows in the wake of a large army. This does not sound a very soldierly suggestion, and I feel convinced that it is not what Sun Tzu meant. Chia Lin, on the other hand, takes the words in a different sense altogether, namely to conquer the enemy. But in that case, they could hardly be followed by these other symbols. Better than this would be the rendering to make isolated captures as opposed to a general attack. 41. He who... excuse me. 41. He who exercises no forethought but makes light of his opponents is sure to be captured by them. The force of this is not easy to appreciate. Chen Hiao says it this way. Says, if bees and scorpions carry poison, how much more will a hostile state? Even a puny opponent, then, should not be treated with contempt. 42. If soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive, and unless submissive, they will be practically useless. If, when the soldiers have become attached to you, punishments are not enforced, they will still be useless. This is wrongly translated by Captain Calthrop. If the troops know the general, but are not affected by his punishments, they are useless. 43. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in the first instance with humanity, but kept under control by means of iron discipline. I don't know why there are so many original symbols, Chinese symbols in the translation. I guess he thinks everybody knows how to read these. His civil virtues endeared him to the people. His sorry. His civil virtues endeared him to the people. His martial prowess kept his enemies in awe. I suppose his marital prowess could keep his enemies in awe too, but that's a whole other ballgame. The ideal commander unites culture with a warlike temper. The profession of arms requires a combination of hardness and tenderness. Again, I must find fault with Captain Calthrop's translation. By humane treatment we obtain obedience. Authority brings uniformity. This is a certain road to victory. If in training soldiers' commands are habitually enforced, the army will be well disciplined. If not, its discipline will be bad. The Tung Tien and Yulon read this way. 45. If a general shows confidence in his men but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the original text has these, but it's awkward without this one. On the other hand, it's clear to Mu accepted the Tung Tien text, which is identical with ours. He says, a general ought, in times of peace, to show kindly confidence in his men, and also make his authority respected, so that when they come to face the enemy, orders may be executed and discipline maintained, because they all trust and look up to him. What Sun Tzu has said in section 44, however, would lead one to rather expect something like this. If a general is always confident that his orders will be carried out, etc. Hence, I am tempted to think that he may have written this, but perhaps this is too conjectural. The gain will be mutual. Chang Yu says the general has confidence in the men under his command, and the men are docile, having confidence in him. Thus, the gain is mutual. He quotes a pregnant sentence from Wei Lao Tzu, chapter 4. The art of giving orders is not to try to rectify minor blunders, and not to be swayed by petty doubts. Vacillation and fussiness are the surest means of sapping the confidence of an army. Captain Calthrop winds up the chapter with a final mistranslation of a more than usually heinous description. Orders are always obeyed if general and soldiers are in sympathy. Besides inventing the latter half of the sentence, he has managed to invert protasis and apodosis. What? That's a weird way to end the chapter. Woo! That was pretty long, though. Yay. Okay, so let's go back and see exactly what Sun Tzu said without all of that extra stuff. 40. Let's see, keep going. 35. 31. My computer's having a hard time keeping up with me. 24. I just use the laptop. I don't have a gaming computer or anything. And my laptop is probably 4 or 5 years old. Maybe I'll put it on my list of things to do to get something better. But I don't know. That's the thing I hate about buying computers is it's like, I don't know. It doesn't take very long for them to be outdated, and they're kind of not fun spending all that money for something that's only going to work for like 2 years. Ooh, 11. Almost there. I say we're almost there. Why am I still on that same page? I don't know why it's having such a hard time going backwards. says there's 264 pages. This is about 138, so we're probably about, according to this, we're only halfway through the book, but this is chapter 9, and there's only 13 chapters, I believe. So I don't know. Whoosh. Okay, here we are. So I'm just going to read the big text, which is just what Sun Tzu said according to this translation. The army on the march. Sun Tzu said, "We come now to the question of encamping the army and observing the signs of the enemy. Pass quickly over mountains and keep in the neighborhood of valleys. 2. Camp in high places. Do not climb heights in order to fight. So much for mountain warfare. 3. After crossing a river, you should get far away from it. 4. When an invading force crosses a river on its onward march, do not advance to meet it in midstream. It will be best to let half the army get across and then deliver your attack. 5. If you are anxious to fight, you should not go to meet the invader near a river which he has to cross. 6. Moor your craft higher up than the enemy and facing the sun. Do not move upstream to meet the enemy. So much for river warfare. 7. In crossing salt marshes, your sole concern should be to get over them quickly without any delay. 8. If forced to fight in a salt marsh, you should have water and grass near you and get your back to a clump of trees. So much for operations in salt marshes. 9. In dry, level country, take up an easily accessible position so that the danger may be in front and safety lie behind. So much for campaigning in flat country. 10. These are the 4 useful branches of military knowledge which enabled the Yellow Emperor to vanquish 4 several sovereigns. 11. All armies prefer high ground to low and sunny places to dark. 12. If you are careful of your men and camp on hard ground, the army will be free from disease of every kind, and this will spell victory. 13. When you come to a hill or a bank, occupy the sunny side with the slope on your right rear. Thus you will at once act for the benefit of your soldiers and utilize the natural advantages of the ground. 14. When, in consequence of heavy rains up country, a river which you wish to ford is swollen and flecked with foam, you must wait until it subsides. 15. Country in which there are precipitous cliffs with torrents running between, deep natural hollows, confined places, tangled thickets, quagmires, and crevices should be left with all possible speed and not approached. 16. While we keep away from such places, we should get the enemy to approach them. While we face them, we should let the enemy have them on his rear. 17. If in the neighborhood of your camp there should be any hilly country, ponds surrounded by aquatic grass, hollow basins filled with reeds, or woods with thick undergrowth, they must be carefully routed out and searched, for these are places where men in ambush or insidious spies are likely to be lurking. 18. When the enemy is close at hand and remains quiet, he is relying on the natural strength of his position. 19. When he keeps aloof and tries to provoke a battle, he is anxious for the other side to advance. 20. If his place of encampment is easy of access, he is tendering a bait. 21. Movement among the trees of a forest shows that the enemy is advancing. The appearance of a number of screens in the midst of thick grass means that the enemy wants to make us suspicious. 22. The rising of birds in their flight is the sign of an ambuscade. Startled beasts indicate that a sudden attack is coming. 23. When there is dust rising in a high column, it is the sign of chariots advancing. When the dust is low but spread over a wide area, it betokens the approach of infantry. When it branches out in different directions, it shows that parties have been sent to collect firewood. A few clouds of dust moving to and fro signify that the army is encamping. 24. Humble words and increased preparations are signs that the enemy is about to advance. Violent language and driving forward as if to the attack are signs that he will retreat. 25. When the light chariots come out first and take up a position on its wings, it is a sign that the enemy is forming for battle. 26. Peace proposals unaccompanied by a sworn covenant indicate a plot. 27. When there is much running about and the soldiers fall into rank, it means that the critical moment has come. 28. When some are seen advancing and some retreating, it is a lure. 29. When the soldiers stand leaning on their spears, they are faint from want of food. 30. If those who are sent to draw water begin by drinking themselves, the army is suffering from thirst. 31. If the enemy sees an advantage to be gained and makes no effort to secure it, the soldiers are exhausted. 32. If birds gather on any spot, it is unoccupied. Clamor by night betokens nervousness. 33. If there is a disturbance in the camp, the general's authority is weak. If the banners and flags are shifted about, sedition is afoot. If the officers are angry, it means that the men are weary. Whoops. Okay. 34. When an army feeds its horses with grain and kills its cattle for food, and when the men do not hang their cooking pots over the campfires, showing that they will not return to their tents, you may know that they are determined to fight to the death. 35. The sight of men whispering together in small knots or speaking in subdued tones points to dissatisfaction amongst the rank and file. 36. Too frequent rewards signify that the enemy is at the end of his resources. Too many punishments betray a condition of dire distress. 37. To begin by bluster, but afterwards to take fright at the enemy's numbers, shows a supreme lack of intelligence. 38. When envoys are sent with compliments in their mouths, it is a sign that the enemy wishes for a truce. 39. If the enemy's troops march up angrily and remain facing ours for a long time without either joining battle or taking themselves off again, the situation is one that demands great vigilance and circumspection. 40. If our troops are no more in number than the enemy, that is amply sufficient. It only means that no direct attack can be made. What we can do is simply to concentrate all of our available strength and keep a close watch on the enemy and obtain reinforcements. 41. He who exercises no forethought but makes light of his opponents is sure to be captured by them. 42. If soldiers are punished before they have grown attached to you, they will not prove submissive, and unless submissive, they will be practically useless. If, when the soldiers have become attached to you, punishments are not enforced, they will still be useless. 43. Therefore, soldiers must be treated in the first instance with humanity, but kept under control by means of iron discipline. This is a certain road to victory. 44. If in training soldiers' commands are habitually enforced, the army will be well disciplined. If not, its discipline will be bad. 45. If a general shows confidence in his men but always insists on his orders being obeyed, the gain will be mutual. That's it. Page 156 out of 264. Whoosh, I hope I remember that. So, yay, there's, let's see, that's chapter 9. Yay! So we're making some progress. That's good. That's good. Yay. Like I said, there's only about 13 chapters here. And just as a little fun treat, I'm going to read you something else. Yay. So what I did, I'm going to read you guys a bedtime story. I went to ChatGPT and I said, write me a bedtime story for grown-ups about a duck. So here it is. I'm going to read you the bedtime story about a duck that ChatGPT wrote for me to read to you. Once upon a time, I don't have any drawings yet. Sorry, I should get drawings or a picture of my ducks, but I'll get to that later. This was just a spur of the moment thing I decided to do today and get you guys a bedtime story. So, after all that hard Sun Tzu, we'll go read about the duck. Once upon a time, in a peaceful pond nestled in a lush forest, there lived a duck named Donald. Donald was a plucky and adventurous duck who loved nothing more than exploring the world around him. One day, as Donald was paddling around the pond, he came across a beautiful swan named Daisy. Daisy was the most graceful, and elegant bird Donald had ever seen, and he immediately fell in love with her. However, Donald was aware that swans were known to be very haughty and disdainful of ducks, so he was very nervous about approaching her. Despite his fears, Donald mustered up the courage to strike up a conversation with Daisy. To his surprise, she was kind and friendly, and they soon became fast friends. As they spent more time together, Donald realized that Daisy was not just beautiful on the outside, but she was also warm and caring on the inside. Before long, Donald realized that his feelings for Daisy had grown into something much more. He decided to confess his love to her, but he was afraid of being rejected. However, Daisy's response was not what he expected. She revealed that she had been harboring feelings for Donald as well, and they soon became a couple. As the days passed, Donald and Daisy's love grew stronger, and they were soon inseparable. They spent their days exploring the forest together and enjoying each other's company. However, their happiness was not to last. One day, a hunter came to the forest, and Donald and Daisy had to flee to escape the danger. During their escape, Daisy was injured, and Donald was heartbroken. He stayed by her side, nursing her back to health and making sure she was safe. Eventually, Daisy recovered, and they returned to the pond where they lived happily ever after. Donald learned that love knows no boundaries and that true love is about what's on the inside, not what's on the outside. And so, my dear friends, this is the story of Donald the Duck and his love for Daisy the Swan. May it remind us all that love knows no bounds and that true love is always worth fighting for. Good night. Ah, I love that. That's so cute. Okay, so I will end there. So thank you for spending time with me. I hope you enjoyed your special bedtime story, and I will see you guys next time then. So goodbye, everyone.